It's Jeff DeVerter, Chief Technology Evangelist at Rackspace Technology. And today, it's a conversation all about defense in depth. And that starts in 30 seconds. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever we find you, whenever we find you today. Hey, everybody, we're back. I'm Jeff DeVerter, Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. Great conversation lined up for you this morning, and I think you're going to really enjoy a couple of really smart folks, which is always good company to keep around. Hey, I want to remind you that a couple of things. First of all, introduce yourself down below. Love to know who you are, where you are, maybe a little bit about what your role is and what you're doing in IT. So feel free to share that below. Of course, this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we continue our series we've been doing all through the month of getting focused and getting deep inside of cybersecurity from all sorts of different angles. Quick reminder on that as well. We will have our white paper on our latest bit of research on how companies around the world. In fact, we interviewed over 1,400 business decision makers on how cybersecurity is impacting them. They're across 10 different countries. So feel free to head over to rackspace.com/solve. Nothing to sell there, just stuff for you, and check that out. All right. Well, as always, we will start our conversation with the news of the week, and in that, we will start by me finding all the right buttons here. There we go. Microsoft released their quarterly earnings, and holy cow, did they have a bump! Now, the moral of this story here is the simple fact that revenues are up. And the revenues are up because cloud adoption is continuing to just explode. Now, we saw massive increases back a year ago, March. Now, we had good steady increases up until that point. But when everybody scampered home for COVID and then companies started loading everything that they had up into the hyperscale clouds, we saw some different errors there. But the overriding theme was pace. Now, also this week, earlier in the week, Google announced their earnings through the roof. Again, massive increases in companies, not just adopting the cloud, but truly transforming themselves for the cloud. Now, CEO Satya Nadella told investors in his earnings call that here was his quote. He said, "Next week, we'll hold our flagship Ignite conference where we'll share the next chapter of Microsoft Cloud from the metaverse to a large scale, from the metaverse to large scale AI and hybrid work environments," which is super exciting. So anybody here going to go to the Ignite conference? Of course, it's free. Of course, it is online. Everything seems to be online these days. Curious if you're going to do that. Hey, looks like we got Reagan from San Antonio. Hey, I'm in San Antonio too. Philip is here. Philip, you're always here. I'm so glad that you do that. I really appreciate it. And I got a test lead from IBM. Hey, Susan Price is here. Susan, it's so good to see you. I've known Susan for maybe decades. I don't know if we'll admit that, will we, Susan? So it's great to see you here. That's fantastic. Hey, we have a little bit more news. Let's look at this. According to 2021 Thales Cloud Security survey, 83%. We just talked about how many people are moving stuff out into the cloud, but 83% of orgs have most of their sensitive data unencrypted in the cloud. Can you believe that? Here we are in National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we've got all of this data floating around unencrypted in the web. Now we're going to hear some news or updates from Google and some of the updates they've done to help you with encryption. Guys, don't hurt yourselves. Now, for all of that stuff that is encrypted, they posted some interesting data as well 35% are using their own encryption, 55 are using the encryption of the provider. So at least there's some encryption being used. I hate to say any encryption is better than no encryption, but this really does need to be a part of your overall strategy, folks. All right, so with that, let's see what's new from the cloud providers this week. First up, AWS Fault Injection Simulator, which is a cool title of a product, by the way. It now supports, it says SOT. Guess who didn't type in very well this morning? Spot injections, interruptions. So not only do they have the flexibility to do this programmatically, but now also from a Spot perspective, starting today, you can trigger interruptions in Amazon EC2 Spot instances using Fault Injection Simulator, or FIS. And this is one of my, I think, one of the cooler products, when you say, hey, let's programmatically break things, but it does help you test resiliency. And that's huge, because things oftentimes do go bump in the night. Now, general availability for AWS Panorama Appliance. This one caught my attention because I love stories of things of how items are moving out closer and closer to the edge, especially with a cloud provider like AWS, who was very, bold in their earlier days about, everything in the cloud, because the cloud is for everything. Well, they're more and more reaching out to the edge. And this is for those types of workloads where there are, generally speaking, cameras involved, looking at grocery store shelves, looking at QA of build processes, all sorts of things where in the past, maybe because of either bandwidth challenges in getting up to the cloud to analyze and programmatically create some insights there, or because it would have required the changing out of all of the camera devices, which could measure in the hundreds, in some cases, in the thousands. Now with this appliance that gets installed and run locally at the edge, they can actually import from almost any camera device. So the Panorama service, nifty. All right, let's move over to Azure. All right, Azure. Azure PureView is now in general availability. Now, by most estimations, by 2025, data generated per year can be expected to grow as much as 175 zettabytes. That's not the total amount. That's how much it's growing. Isn't that incredible? Yet most aren't prepared to govern the data. So this new service the service that's now generally available from Microsoft, their PureView, is a way for to create a governance plan and implement that governance plan on all the data, not just the data in Azure, the data in your own data centers, or maybe over in AWS, or even wherever it may reside, even in SaaS-based offerings. So creating a detailed plan about all that data, which let's all hope is encrypted. Remember the story from before. So Azure PureView now generally available. Also from Azure is general availability of the Azure Data Explorer Insights. And you can now get comprehensive monitoring of your Azure Data Explorer clusters, along with unified view of your Azure Data Explorer performance. This is pretty awesome. It all goes back to data. Guys, we're moving applications, we're moving workloads, we're moving cameras, but what sits behind all of that? Because it's all useless without a way to store the data. Now that you've got these additional capabilities like the Azure Data Explorer Insights, you can now capture greater depths of information about that data and the metadata across all of your different data resources, which is pretty great. So that's general availability from Azure. I think there's probably a couple of zones, regions that maybe aren't fully covered. Hey, let's talk about Google for a second. It seems every week they're updating their Anthos cluster capability for VMware. You can see the latest version that's now supported and available. And also from Google is this one. This one's pretty awesome. BigQuery SQL column level encryption using the key management service. This is pretty incredible because you now can use the key managed service, you can actually have your key pairs very separate from being stored in the data itself. You can manage this at multiple layers as well with AEAD encryption functions, which is great, meaning you can get at it programmatically. Now, use cases for encryption with cloud KMS keys include, things like externally encrypted data that needs to be stored in BigQuery. You don't want to do that in plain text, or double access control on encrypted data in your BigQuery clusters. Pretty awesome stuff. All right, so that's what's new from the cloud. Now, what I want to do is jump into our conversation. Now, this week, like most all the weeks, let's turn that button off right there, is we're going to have conversation that deals with all things cybersecurity. It's this National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, as we've talked about. And I've got a couple of really interesting folks to come be a part of the conversation. So why don't we go ahead, Daniel, and bring up our friends from Akamai as well as Rackspace. Let's just get everybody in here. So we've got Sean Flynn who's here. And here we are. Everyone's coming in slowly but surely. And we got Adam Brown. Sean's camera's having some challenges. So Sean, I'll let you kind of maybe see if there's something on your end you can deal with that. But Adam, welcome to the program.
Thanks, guys, for having me. Adam Brown. I'm a part architect on the Elastic Engineering security offering that Rackspace recently has launched.
Fantastic. Glad that you're here. And Sean, your camera works now too from Atlanta. That's great. Hey, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Sean, you're with Akamai. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Sean Flynn. I'm a director of security and technology with Akamai. And, to put it simply, I'm a customer advocate for security. So I'm the voice of the customer when it comes to dealing with product. I also get the opportunity to talk to customers about their current security challenges, seeing how Akamai can align with those challenges and provide solutions for those challenges, as well as keeping in mind that we're trying to develop and solve the challenges for the future. So how can we position ourselves so that, as the security threat landscape changes, we're well positioned to be able to solve those.
Fantastic. So defense in depth. Let's chat a little bit about that, because it's an umbrella term. There's a lot that's involved in it. Maybe we can define that and then kind of start to pick apart some of the aspects of it.
Sure. I think when we talk about defense in depth, and it's a very common term when we're dealing with security, what is defense in depth, and what are some of the strategies that are used when it comes to defense in depth? So, it's a layered response. It's having multiple, basically barriers in place, so that if somebody gets past one, it goes to the next, right? And I think one of the popular ones that we're seeing now is, and I think this resonates with trying to solve some of the more topical challenges that we're seeing now, which is like ransomware, right, credential stuffing, and account takeover fraud, is attacking the cyberkill chain, which is, the cyberkill chain is, in a sense, every step that an attacker has to take to successfully carry out.
All right, there went Sean. Adam, you want to maybe pick it up? We'll see if Sean's internet connection gets happy again.
Yeah. So as he was saying, defense in depth is kind of layering those different technologies to attack the cyberkill chain. So, and depending on the attack vector that you're dealing with, you layer different technologies within your environment to attack different things that would be occurring within that environment. So, one of the examples you can kind of bring up is, so let's say we have a SQL injection. So for those who don't know what a SQL injection is, that is where an attacker utilizes the website to access the backend database. So it allows them basically to bypass all of your infrastructure and directly just access the database.
It's a straight shot over to the SQL.
Yeah, straight over to SQL.
Nice.
Just pull out whatever you want.
And you're basically using the application as a conduit to get there.
Yep, conduit. And so very dangerous from that standpoint. But you kind of layer that defense in depth in front of it, right? So your attack vector is your website, right? So protecting your website. So the first part from a Cyberkill Chain standpoint is recon. So they'll scope out the website, figure out what's on the website, what technologies are present on the website. They usually do that with something automated, right? So it's a bot that scans the website and figures out what's going on with the website. Well, if you put things like bot mitigation that would able to detect that, hey, there's a bot that is scanning my website, let me just deny all access to my website. So you deny them the ability to recon, at least in a from a bot standpoint. It really slows down their recon. And then at that point is they'll start moving over to exploitation weaponization. You start implementing web application firewalls in front of that, maybe RASP technologies on the application layer to really just inspect what the attacker is doing on the website and mitigating that from that aspect. And then from the backend database standpoint, and on the application standpoint, you do things like input validation. So you get your SDLC pipelines in place, you secure functions, secure coding practices. And then on the database side, you can start using stored procedures, um, and then auditing controls or monitoring the database calls for particular technologies to kind of ensure that maybe there's nothing anomalous going on within the database. There's not somebody pulling an entire table when nobody normally pulls that entire table. So you kind of layer those different technologies in place and hopefully mitigate all attack vectors for that particular attack. And then you just rinse and repeat and move on depending on what you're kind of attacking.
Right.
What
Well,
problem you're trying to defend against.
And in that really the key, if we were to think of a theme for how to help deal with cybersecurity issues these days, and that is layers. It's got to be layers. You have to have vertical layers as you talk about going through the different layers of the application, but also horizontal as we segment our organizations to help, should somebody get through, to be able to keep them from moving laterally around there. Sean, we're glad you're back. The darn interwebs just don't behave sometimes, but we figured out how to click back in. We're glad you're here. So maybe kind of pick up. You're with Akamai, and Sean or Adam just sort of walked us through some of those layers. But where does Akamai play in this picture?
Sure. So a lot of what Adam was saying are solutions that we provide from the kind of the first part of it, which is the reconnaissance piece, where we have solutions that can actually tell our customers, hey, we actually have seen this particular IP scanning 4 different applications before it's in the last 2 hours before it came to your site. Do you even want to let them on? Then you've got the web application and an API protection piece of that, which is if for some reason they're able to get through reconnaissance, we're able to protect the customer from those attacks on those vulnerabilities.
Right.
And then bots, bots have been a major issue for the last several years and just keeps growing. And so bot management solutions are definitely in high demand in lots of different industries right now because of how prevalent they are.
Yeah. It's great to see, when we think of Akamai, it goes back, I go back to, where you guys started, and there's these amazing, internet pipes that go around the world, and caching the CDN capabilities, but so much more now in helping to not just make sure that information is available, but to make sure it's only available to the right people. So I love how you guys are digging deeper, in this space. Real quick call out though, Philip, yes, now you've got an Aerosmith song stuck in my head. Thank you very much for that. And Dale Brazy, this is like old friend reunion time here this morning. So glad that you are here. And folks, we do these live sessions every Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30 Central on most days. Had a travel issue this Tuesday, but most of the time we are here. So Adam, let's kind of bounce back to you. You had been very focused here at Rackspace and what we call our GTS team, but now you're part of what we call Elastic Engineering, and it really is for security. And it really is this change in approach to how not just how Rackspace goes about helping companies. We're not here necessarily to pitch that, but what I'd love for you to really talk about though is how companies can adopt maybe that sort of a model because of the change in the threats, because of how we build these pods together. Maybe you can define what a pod is, but how that's helpful to companies.
Yeah. So Elastic Engineering for Security is a team of pod engineers, that kind of like an extension of an existing security team. So the makeup of a pod, the goal is to have IT specialists from different areas within the security realm, right? So compliance specialists, operating system specialists, cloud native specialists, web application specialists, container specialists,
Yeah.
to where you kind of have expertise across all the different areas to help secure your environment. So it's really going to be a partnership between the different security specialists on your team and focusing on those different areas of your IT organization. Um, and really, when you kind of layer that into defense in depth, each specialty kind of targets a different layer, right? So if and in as customers, we're starting to see customers migrate into the cloud, right? So I think it's by 2024, half of IT will be in the cloud, right? So there's kind of this huge shift into the cloud that we're kind of seeing, but a lot of that initially right now is lift and shift operations, right? So we talk about customers that have a VM or a server in a dedicated DC, and they're like, okay, I need a VM in Azure, or I need a VM in AWS or GCP, right? So they're just taking what they have, maybe changing some of the technologies to cloud native, but really not using those cloud native SaaS-based applications that scale across globally. So, like an example, like Azure um, databases, where you don't even have to maintain the database, really, the backend database anymore. You're just using the application, right? So, but right now, it's like, okay, I know SQL, so let me just spin up a SQL server.
Yeah.
So they're just lifting and shifting that operation into the cloud, maybe not gaining all the advantage of doing so, but we're seeing that where you're still kind of having to attack the same attack vectors that you were in the dedicated space and the data center space, but not necessarily um, the utilizing the cloud native. Now, when you start moving to more serverless architectures, with Lambda functions, Azure functions, to where you are no longer using the operating systems. You're using web app services, um, the SaaS-based databases, things like that. You don't have the same ability there to put your security tools on, right? You can't install endpoint protection on
When
your
there's no
Azure
defined
function.
endpoint because it's just
Yeah.
this pool of serverless functions you're connecting to.
Yep. So your traditional tools that your security team knows and knows, and hey, this is what I use to protect my environment, they don't necessarily apply anymore, right?
That's right.
You're now having to figure out, okay, what are the new tools? What works in this space? What can I do to protect this Azure function, my API that I no longer have the ability to put um, operating system monitors on it, or put a firewall in front,
Right.
right? So you're having to shift how you protect your environment, and that's really what Elastic Engineering for Security kind of helps you kind of divulge it or
Well,
point out.
ultimately,
Yeah,
as you talk about a pod, as you talk about all those different roles, whether it's
yep,
operating system people, whether it's container people, whether it's all the different layers, that's what everybody has to think about because there are all of those specific things. So, Sean, maybe back to you in this serverless sort of world where somebody's moved out to their hyperscale cloud of choice. They have done a move and improve, not a lift and shift. So they've moved out there. Now they're using, maybe a NoSQL type of an environment. They're containered up or they're functioned up. What are the products? What are the services that Akamai brings to the table to help in that cloud native world?
Sure, sure. And one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing from customers is, my targets, the things I have to protect are moving. They're moving to the cloud, or they're moving to a different data center, or I just acquired a new company and now I have all these different assets that, how do I create a consistent security policy around everything? And that's really where, cloud solutions like what Akamai provides really comes into play, because we have the ability to create a solution around all these different applications and these different assets, regardless of where they are, whether they're in a cloud or hybrid environment or with a cloud and data centers. And we're able to do that while protecting while they're actually in the process of moving it over. So one day it might be hardware, the other one is or in a data center, and the other one the next day they're in the cloud. How do I continue that transition? And so, the web application firewall, for example, is a great example of, being able to create a single security policy for a number of applications, regardless of where they are, and regardless of whether they're in the middle of transitioning or not.
Wow, that's great. So, it is a multifaceted approach. Anybody who spends any time looking at or reading about some of these exploits, that they're not always the most sophisticated. It's a user that clicks a link. It is poor hygiene on old servers. It is poor configuration across, in the cloud environment. The cloud is an amazing a foundation to ride upon because it does cover so many things, like being able to handle 2.3 terabit denial of service attack just natively because it's what's built into the networking features. But companies can still leave the front door open. Most of the attacks and the ransomware issues that we see these days are because of blocking and tackling, the basic stuff. So, hearing about being able to, through your tooling, be able to create a consistent security policy across applications, regardless of location, huge amount of value there, and to be able to monitor that over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other side of it, which is how do you protect your employees from going out? So, we're protecting the applications, but how do you protect the employees from going out to click on malware or going to an infected site? And, we do have solutions on that from a recursive DNS type solution. So we can prevent and block.
Oh, the internet from Atlanta is not great today. All right, so we are glad that we've had Akamai here, and he'll be back in a second. But we're almost done with our time. Adam, any parting thoughts as we get ready to close up for today? Again, I love going back. We're not here to sell Rackspace stuff, but the way that we've designed these pods, what are the roles in the pods? Because those are the roles that every company needs to think about how they're going to solve for.
Yep. So roles. And they will have to shift and change for your IT operations because whatever what's the environment, that's the kind of people you need to hire, right? So,
Yeah.
So operating system specialists that can go harden an operating system, cloud native specialists because you're going to need somebody that can layer the cloud native security technologies and understands cloud native the cloud environments within themselves. So if you're an AWS, get an AWS expert, right? And layer those tech so that he understands, how to secure an S3 bucket, right? Because we've had so many instances where an S3 bucket has been public to the internet and all the data is just there. And then if you are doing serverless, so you're really going to have to focus on your SDLC pipelines, container security, and then always in your back pocket have a compliance specialist, right? Somebody who can take your compliance frameworks, help guide you through those frameworks, and figure out what things have you targeted, what things that you still have left to do, right? Always have somebody that kind of guides that way, and that's really where those compliance specialists kind of come into play. So, and it help you here and attest to your compliance frameworks that you probably need if you're like PCI compliant, as an example.
Fantastic. Well, Sean, I'm glad you made it back. Sorry that the internet from Atlanta is not spectacular today, but I'm so glad that you were able to be a part of the program. Sean, how can people get a hold of you? I assume you're on the LinkedIn and all the places. We lost him again. That's awesome. Yes, you can find him again. All right, everybody. Hey, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the latest analysis that we've done, the research that we've done, over 1,400 business leaders in 10 different countries, all about cybersecurity stuff, can be found over at rackspace.com/solve. That's a safe place, folks, where there's no salespeople there. There's no pop-up to try to get you to talk to a salesperson there. It's just, it's our thought leadership program. And that's where you can go to learn more about all these topics. So that will be posted there. If it's not there already, it'll be there by the middle of next week, but go watch for that. It's also where you can find the podcast that I host, Cloud Talk. Love to check you out there. We will be back on Tuesday at 8:30 Central Time in the morning, every Tuesday and Thursday, 8:30 Central Time. Hope that you can make it. Dale, it was a delight to have you in here. And Susan, if anyone's looking for experienced consultants or innovation consultants, Susan is a gem, and you can find her on LinkedIn. She's one of the best that I know. Now, up on that rackspace.com/solve, while the full report is not there quite yet, we do have extraordinarily informative infographic to tease some of the findings we found in there. Here's what I'll also tease you really quick about as well. Everyone thinks they're a little better protected than they really are. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of the program this morning. I hope you have an amazing day. Adam, thank you for taking time out of managing a pod of incredibly smart security specialists. And Sean, glad that you were here. And our good friends over at Akamai, if you guys are looking for solutions, Akamai is an amazing company to work with, and we can help you with that. With that, everyone, have a great day, and I'll see you Tuesday at 8:30 Central.